Welcome back to the Inorganic Podcast. I'm Christian Hassold.
And I'm Ayelet Shipley.
And we are your best friends in M&A.
I'm excited to be here. So this week, we are going to be talking about something that Christian and I get asked about a lot as we talk to sellers and think about who we're going to buy, what we want to buy. And the biggest thing that happened is when seller or potential sellers come to us and they say, when should we start thinking about what do I need to do to become sellable? Well, if you're already you're about to go through the sale process, if you're just starting to think about that now, you're too late. Many of the founders that we've worked with weren't planning to sell until they actually were, and the deal just came along. And so by that time, it's either very easy or it can just be a disaster. As we know, agencies aren't always the cleanest when it comes to financials and prepping to sell. And so this episode is about how to create optionality, value, and leverage, even if you're not thinking about exiting yet, because the biggest thing that you can do right now is be prepared for when the time comes. And so we were thinking about, how do we even think about starting this episode? And so we want to think about this from both the buyer perspective, because that's usually, that's the seat that Christian sits in right now, and the seller's perspective. Because from a buyer's perspective, when you're like, is this agency actually sellable right now? Like, are they ready to sell? There are certain phrases that we hear that get our minds to start going that they might be ready. Or from the seller's perspective, when they're coming and thinking about, or they're starting to have these thoughts, that usually indicates that it's time to really start getting your ducks in a row. And so one of the common phrases that I hear all the time that triggers me if I'm a buyer is the seller saying, I've been doing this a really long time. We've been going through a lot of ups and downs. I'm sick of dealing with payroll and taxes, and I just want to focus on what I'm good at. I really would just love a bigger seat at the table. Christian, what are some of the ones that you hear?
Yeah, so frequently what I hear from sellers is, I want to be a part of a bigger ship. I'd like to have more to sell to my clients. I realize that when I bring them one capability that I may have, whether it's creative, whether it's social, or whether it's video, it's only a component of all the possible things that a client might need from me. And I'm one at risk of losing that client if they find a larger agency that can do that for me. And two, I have really great client relationships that I've built over the years. I think that there's more that I can do to really be there for them. And so being a part of something bigger gets me really excited. And that's usually the thing, that the words that I love to hear, because it's like, well, look what I've got for you. And then we get into the details, ...
Yeah. And then what are the details that go behind that?
Well, I think the title of this episode really speaks to the point I think we want to punctuate in this conversation, which is whenever you start a business, the first thing that you should do on day one is, even before day one, is what is the outcome that I want to achieve? Do I want to create a lifestyle business that just makes money forever and I don't have any plans to sell? Who will take over the business after you can't run the business anymore? Like, that may be one question you want to evaluate when you're thinking about a lifestyle business. The second may be, I want to get some investors to help me grow faster. I might have a really great business idea and I think you can go get investors. Those investors are going to want to know, how big can you make the company? What kind of returns do you think you can produce? And another is, it's like, I'm just very, very good at this field of work and I want to build a business around it because I'm really passionate about it and I like it. But you have to sort of assume at one point or another, someone else might want that thing that you have to be a part of something bigger. Is that something you'll want to sell, or do you want to keep it? And if the answer is, I'm not sure, or I think I might want to sell it, I'll know when it's the right time. Day one is the day to really be thinking about all the things that you need to do to build a business that's going to be really attractive for a buyer to want to pick up, and to put yourself in a position to successfully transit that business on a period of time after you sell it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say there is a very large percentage, which specifically in the agency world, most of these agency owners were the ones that were very good at their craft and then went on their own. And that's when the business became a business and stopped being the thing that they just were good at and getting clients. And so there often becomes a lack of understanding in terms of even timeline of like, what does sellability mean? And what does a timeline for sale even look like? Because most founders don't realize that when you sell your agency and sell your business, it's not just on, okay, I sold my business, I got the, hopefully cash on close, wire came through, I'm done. The timeline is significantly longer than what people often think, because there's earnouts, there's non-competes, there's transition periods. You never just, almost never just sell and disappear. You have to, especially with an agency, the buyer is buying your clients, your team, the products that you're putting out. And so it's a very people heavy business. And so there is a large transition timeline. And typically, and you can tell me if you see otherwise, we see oftentimes, 1 minimum 2-year timeframes of an earnout, right? That's 2 years, like at the time that you sign your purchase agreement and close your deal. And then if you're going to backtrack before that, the sale process can often take at least, a few months, often a year, especially if you're saying, I'm going to go through a formal process. Okay, we start getting the business ready. Then we go out to the buyers. Then we have the timeline of the deal process. And so that can take up to a year. So now you're looking at, from the time you're thinking right now, if this is the first time you're thinking about it, to the time I can wipe my hands clean, 3 years.
Yeah. So I think the important thing to be thinking about as a agency founder is, at the end of the day, a buyer is looking usually to solve one of 3 basic problems. I would like great clients with case studies that are bringing revenue into the business. That's kind of the financial aspect. And the second thing is, I want talent and/or, in the age of AI, technological capabilities that are going to allow me to service clients more broadly than I am today and more efficiently than I can today, if there's a technological aspect of the business. And so those things have to be true with you as a founder, and also after the time frame of which you've been acquired. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about, like, the business. A very difficult business to acquire is a business where ultimately the founder is everything to everybody, and we're really just buying the founder. That'd be more like an acquire scenario. What we're really talking about is, setting up the business for success by building a team around you, a really good team around you, and setting up a business for whatever outcome you decide you want to have, including, it goes back to, we're talking about exiting a business through a purchase process, but even if you build a lifestyle business, you want the same thing. Life isn't always certain. You may get sick, you may get injured. Your employees have, usually in smaller companies, they really believe in you and they really believe in what they're doing. And if they wake up one day and you can't do the job anymore for some reason, you want to make sure the machine that you've built can continue on without you, regardless. It's really about succession planning, whether that succession is another person that you've appointed to take over, or a succession is, I would like a buyer to take the company over for me, and I'm willing to spend some time transiting my way out of the business through a sale process.
This may be controversial, but I hate the term lifestyle business, because, like, what even is a lifestyle business these days? What, owners of companies are like, oh, this is just easy peasy lifestyle. Like, what is defined as it?
This will be a rabbit hole episode, but I can tell you there are a lot of people who start businesses, that maybe $500,000, $1 million in revenue, and it makes just enough money to cover their fundamental salary. Through ingenuity, through luck, other things, the business starts growing and it turns into a $3 or $4 or $5 million business. And as their take-home pay increases with the growth of the business, they then start buying more things and utilizing the benefits of that income to get a lot of nice things, a nice house, a boat, an RV. And sometimes they get a little one over their head. And so what happens is they're like, well, I don't have to pay income taxes if the business buys the boat, or I can start using the business as kind of a mini piggy bank. And then you start having these entanglements between your personal life and your business life. And that, to me, by definition, is a lifestyle business, because in part, you're extremely reliant off of the income for your lifestyle, and your business has now become sort of entangled in your personal life. And that is, by definition, for me, a lifestyle business. And it happens everywhere. Like, sure, it's okay. You're going to lease a Tesla through the business. Like, this is a very common thing. A buyer is going to basically say, do you want the car? Or do you want us to, sell it? Like, how do you want us to deal with it? Like, those are kind of okay things that just normally typically happen. But I've seen scenarios where a lot of other things, country club memberships, a lot of other things start flowing through the business that don't really directly tie to the business. This is kind of another rabbit hole, but that is to me, what is a lifestyle business is one that becomes entangled with your personal life in one way or the other.
And then that then becomes those are the most important to be preparing to sell then, in my opinion, because you need to be able to support the lifestyle that you want in the future. And you've built this asset. So make it a legitimate asset that is going to support your life, but also your future lifestyle and what you want. Because if it's doing well enough that you're able to do all these things, you better get your ducks in a row to be able to support your future lifestyle that you really want. And so that's, I think, like what really comes down to what we were saying of like, okay, well then what do I do to make it sellable? And the biggest, thing that I often have seen is that if you're not ready when the right offer comes, you lose leverage because there is a time and a place for every deal. And I truly believe it, which is also why it's important because market shifts, your business can shift on the drop of a dime. And when the right offer comes, it's really important. I've seen people hold out for saying, well, in 2020, I saw these crazy multiples and, 13, 14x multiples. And so that's what I'm going to hold out for, even though the market is traditionally has been and will be, maybe at a 7 or 8x. And so if a 7 and 8x comes for your business, you should really be prepared to take it and have the things in play and not hold out for that 14 that might not happen. And so your leverage comes when your business, you are prepared to sell and you create sellability.
So let's talk about what a sellable business looks like. Like, what are the traits of that business? I think from my perspective, the most important thing I'm looking for is an operator that is really clear about what they're doing, who they're doing it for, meaning we're a full service agency and here's the kind of clients we serve. We solely serve consumer packaged goods clients. And, we only do this kind of work. We only do that kind of work. And every once in a while, if someone asks for something weird, I either partner or I just use a contractor. But I have really clear rails on the kind of business that I'm operating. So that's like one example trait that usually at the top is something that buyers are looking for. Buyers are looking for capabilities and they're looking for clients and they're looking for clients of a particular kind. They're also looking at what is the spend of those clients? Are your clients retainer or project customers? Are they spending $5,000 a month? Are they spending $50,000 a month? All of those things are key economic drivers to positioning a business to be sellable. It doesn't really matter whether you have 100 clients doing $5,000 a month or 10 clients doing $50,000 a month. What's more important is consistency. Consistency around what you do, consistency around the clients that you serve, and consistency in terms of your financial profile. More consistency makes you more attractive to specific buyers who are looking to solve specific problems.
What's a red flag that you see when evaluating the consistency?
The first red flag is usually and this is very common, especially for the founder that you described. They're just very good at what they do. They love what they do. They typically take a really big client with them from wherever they were before. And that big client becomes a more than material part of their current business. We call that highly concentrated revenue. It may be a 50% revenue concentration or a 60% revenue concentration, meaning one client is 60% of the revenue of the business. And the founder says, this is the best relationship. They've known me for years. They love me. It's great and all that stuff, which is awesome. What that means for a financial buyer is we have to make a bet that one client won't go anywhere after the sale or especially after the founder leaves. The second thing is this is also kind of a red flag for frequently what happens is really big companies, they love to outsource entire departments or capabilities to an agency. And so really you're just sort of an outsource. You're not actually a real true strategic partner. You're just in their mind an outsource partner. And if your ownership changes or your economics change in any way, they could just be, willy-nilly off and moving on after the purchase, which puts the entire financial underpinning of the contemplated purchase at risk. So that's a long diatribe on one category. A second category, as I mentioned earlier, is a lot of random clients that don't really have a relationship to one another. You'll have like a consumer packaged goods company, a nonprofit, a life sciences. I can't emphasize that having a diverse set of clients in a category, one or two categories, is highly attractive versus having a smattering of many different clients across many different categories. And the reason why we like to see focus on client is if you're selling in CPG, you just really understand the nuances of the CPG consumer journey, the buyer journey, and all the things that they need to be successful. And it just means that you're much more intimately familiar with how to successfully serve those clients. Think about it from a buyer perspective. If you're a buyer of an agency, one of the problems you're trying to solve is, I need more people on our team to understand the ins and outs of how this client's needs. And the more diversification you have on your team in terms of knowledge of client needs makes you even more defensible if you're a much larger business. We'd love to have a perfect world where we could just service any client, any place, any time, but it's just kind of impractical. And so I think those are kind of the two really big things at the outset that drive everything else. The third thing that I mentioned earlier, and I'll just expand on it, is your economic model needs to be super clean and super clear. If you have one client that's on a $5,000 a month retainer and another that's on a $50,000 a month retainer and another that just sort of like you write a new scope every quarter and there's a new dollar amount, it's really hard to value the business, but also match it with your own economics. Some agencies want to serve enterprise clients that are $50,000 a month or more in MRR. Some agencies love the SMB market of clients between $5,000 and $10,000 a month max. And that is a great market to serve as well. You can build a whole economic model around it. The more focus you have, again, the easier it is to match with a potential buyer that will have the same values as you.
Yeah. I think that this is like a very pointed question that a lot of sellers don't know the answer to. What is the maximum concentration you want to have? Like, what's the bottom line? If you have more than this, it's a really big risk for us.
I'll say the cop out is like no hard and fast rule. But look, if you're a $20 million agency and you have 15% client concentration, that's kind of the absolute max acceptable concentration. I'll give you one caveat, like if it's a little more, but I worked a lot in my life with 3M as an example. And once you get into these big conglomerate companies that have what I call federated buying teams, a federated buying team is like Christian makes decisions for this department, Ayelet makes decisions for that department, Bob makes this, like you're talking to multiple buyers, it's like one purchasing work stream. There's a little room for exception there where ultimately you've just managed to penetrate a client really effectively. Then you can get a little bit more conviction around one, you might lose one of those clients, but you're not going to lose all of them in one fell swoop. But I've seen a lot of scenarios where it's really just one client, one contact in that client account that's driving all the relationships. And in that case, larger than 15%, what's going to happen is you're going to find us putting a lot of structure around trying to protect the potential loss of that client. If you're in a smaller business, I mean, again, south of 15% concentration is really, I think, as high as it would go from my perspective. I don't know if you've seen different.
I mean, so that's, I think, the caveat that we should say is, if you have a higher client concentration, your business can still be sold. But all of these traits that we're talking about that create a sellable agency, they are what needs to happen. When you start hitting these, they're risk factors for the buyer. And your risk factors are your discount factors. And these are the things that start driving down the value of your business. So while you could still be sold if you have a 30, 40, 50% client concentration, because I have seen that this year, I have sold multiple businesses with higher client concentrations, it is driving the value of your business down. And so when you're thinking about selling, how do I get the maximum value for my agency? These are the problems you have to solve right now. How am I going to diversify my clients?
It all comes down to value. Like there's a buyer for every kind of business ultimately, but it's ultimately, it's always about how much value can you capture for the business that you've created. I think another thing that is a real important trait in a business is putting 2 or 3 next level operators around you to do important things like operations management. Agencies, project management is really important. Having really good time tracking. Why does time tracking matter? Because a big way that like deals get complicated is in revenue recognition. Like you do $1 million contract, an annual contract, and you recognize all of that revenue in January, but you're actually servicing the contract throughout the year. Now you have to redistribute the revenue. Well, what employees and what things? So you want an operator who really is keeping track of how is the client being serviced at a very finite level. And the second thing that I think is a really, really important component for an agency, because you're such a financially sensitive business, is having a really strong CFO or a VP of finance who is doing a really good job of keeping track of your revenue recognition policies and, tracking a detailed level when you're billing, when you're recording, and trying to tie that back to the contract. We all know that an agency like it's really hard to do a lot of this because clients give you orders of like, hey, I'll do the $1 million annual contract, but I only want you to charge me $150,000 a month. Even if you do more or less work in a month, I want you to charge me that amount of money. And they do that because they're trying to cash flow and they need something predictable and so on and so forth. But that puts the onus on you as the agency owner to take that money that you're collecting and make sure you're recognizing that revenue when the work is actually performed. When that doesn't happen, what happens is a buyer will come along and say, it looks to me like you've only completed 50% of this work, even though you've collected 75% of the funds. So I'm going to take 25% of those funds and I'm either going to put a hold back on them or I might discount the business in that scenario. So it's just so important to have a team around you that is really kind of doing the day-to-day operational stuff. I think people's another one. You don't need to go hire a really expensive head of people or HR. You just need someone who really keeps the culture together and keeps everybody motivated and excited when you're focusing on clients. Because at the end of the day, as a buyer, I'm buying really great people. I want talent and people who really love the work that they do. And so you need that team to be very cohesive, and you need all that stuff that happens as a business grows. People don't always play nicely together. You have to have someone kind of making sure that the ship not only runs on time, but everyone can kind of play together and stay in their lane. So I think those are other traits that go into organ operations.
I think that a good exercise for people that are selling their business right now is like a buyer speed test is what I call it, right? So if you were, if a buyer was to come in, look at your financials, look at your org chart and spend an hour with the key members of your team, is the buyer going to walk away feeling like this is a legitimate business that I can come in, that someone can come in and buy and scale and bring in more money and feel good about it? Or do they feel like, oh, I am going to have to really dig in and do deep diligence and push out the timeline because things are complicated? Like if you as the seller off the top of your head think about that and you're like, and it's the second piece that I said, this is when it's time to start putting all the things that Christian mentioned into play to start cleaning.
That's totally right. That's exactly the right point. I think there's kind of a sub bullet, which is, okay, well, how many people do I need? How big of a next level bench do I need? I would think once you get to $10 million in revenue, if you get to $10 million in revenue, I'd really just make sure the roles that I just described, someone who's very operationally process strong, someone who's really financially strong, someone who really is people focused on running the train and the people. And sometimes the finance and the HR sort of work very closely together or they're interchangeable. But I'd say as you get bigger, really make those distinctly different roles. The one I wouldn't compromise on from day one is the operations person. You can outsource finance. You can get a really good CPA or an accountant to do a lot of the stuff on an outsourced basis. Eventually, you want to insource it. You want to have really good systems and processes and controls for cash and money, especially if you're on a time frame that you will want to go through an acquisition process. And a lot of the value that a banker is going to bring with you, especially if you choose to use a banker as a part of, someone who's going to help you with the selling process, a lot of what they do is really help you get ahead on a lot of that financial due diligence. So maybe if you're thinking about selling, 2 or 3 years from now, it's really great to start that banker relationship right now. They can give you, like this episode will give you kind of the nuggets, but they will put you in a great position to have, 2 or 3 years of trailing really clean, organized financials. They'll get you the right people to do all of those things.
The biggest one that you haven't mentioned, though, I haven't heard is, we talked about it a little bit earlier, is the people that are in charge of sales. Like the founder, that's the one that holds every client relationship and sales relationship, is a huge risk to the buyer because the founder isn't necessarily staying.
Yeah, I love that point actually. Yeah, so that's a really great point. And I'm thinking a lot about, financial controls, operational controls, like the things we really break down. Look, a lot of agencies are really not good at sales. They somehow manage to get sales through founder. I think one of the things that I look for, if you're a 10 to $15 million agency, I've seen even 20 or $30 million agencies, it's still really the founder or founders that are driving a lot of sales. Maybe it's one or two other people in the business. In a perfect world, you'd have a sales team for every 5 million in revenue, have one person dedicated to sales. And that one person should be responsible for sourcing, closing, and booking around $1.5 to $2 million in business every year. That would be the North Star. I have yet to see that North Star really work. If you can't have that, going back to that team as a part of that operation, have customer success, have client success that are really good at retaining the clients that you have and finding ways to expand and upsell that relationship.
So even if the founder is doing the sales, then the moment it can be transferred into your account management team, like it's diversified in who's holding these relationships, so that if one person were to leave or the founder, right, we can find new people to bring in sales, but we don't want to lose the clients that you already do have if we're coming in and buying a company.
Yeah. I think, ultimately we've talked a lot about sort of the importance of having someone looking after your financial house, having clean financials. I mean, you could probably do a whole nother episode, and there are plenty of others out there have gone into real great detail around having clean financials. But if you have the right people and the right support, whether it's a CPA or an accountant looking after your financials for you and kind of calling out the potential risks and things you should be doing differently. Like, does it make sense that my golf club membership is going through the business? Well, if all of the clients that you happen to have really like to play golf and you're using it for business like more than 50% of the time, sure, fine. But if it's really just to put the golf club membership through the business and you don't really take clients out for golf that often, then, that's kind of like the test. I think other examples might be, I've seen vacation homes, or here's a common problem in really successful agencies. You have a lot of cash sitting on balance sheet and you actually don't want to pay yourself out because of taxes. So you sit on the money and you just let it produce interest. This is especially for businesses that the founders don't have high cash demand. So they sit on the cash. And one of the things that I've seen them do is invest the cash in crypto, invest the cash in real estate. And those are not really great things to do with your cash. It's okay to have cash on your balance sheet. It's okay to invest them, for example, in treasuries, but you really don't want to put them into what I would call, semi-liquid things that have highly volatile valuations, because when a seller goes to look at that later, it just becomes complicated to untangle and ends up being sort of almost a discount off a purchase price because they don't want to deal with the stickiness of those assets. So the importance of kind of consulting professionals on how you should be managing the finances of the business end to end is a whole episode in of itself. I think that, as we're kind of going through this conversation about readiness, a lot of it comes back to the founder themselves and sort of where we started the episode. And that is really founder clarity about what success looks like for you post-acquisition.
Yeah. And what would you want in that ideal world, right? Like really going through your timeline and what you want and the financial number you want to walk away with. And then talking to these bankers or other individuals in the field, could be Christian, could be me, could be whoever, that say, okay, well, here are the deal structures that we see too. So here's what you need to think about around money that you would take home versus timeline of earnouts and all of those things, right? There's intricacies in all of this and it does change, but there are some pretty strong consistencies. And, you being ready as the founder emotionally and physically, right, is really important.
Yeah. We've talked about a lot of the qualities of the company. Now let's talk about the qualities of the founder. Number one, you're ready to sell. You do want to sell. You want to sell for any of the reasons we've mentioned already, including after the earnout period, after you've kind of had some time helping transit the business to the buyer. You just want to go try something else. A lot of founders sell their businesses and start all over again. It's totally cool to do that. To have that clarity and to be transparent about that is very helpful to the buyer and gains a lot of confidence in that you're being very transparent and forthright about what your intentions are. I think the second thing that you need to do is really be clear on ultimately what you want to take home. How much cash do you want? And I think the many hundreds of conversations I've had with founders who are contemplating at one point of exit, the ones that really resonate very well with me, the ones that I like to keep track of, are the ones who say, I want to get to 8 million in revenue and 2.5 million in EBITDA because I know I can sell my business for 7x or 8x if I build the right kind of quality business. And therefore they're saying, I'm looking for, $10 million takeaway on closing. And I know that there's going to be some holdback or there might be some stock involved. And just ones who have really, really thought through the practical reality. The ones that are really hard for me to want to spend a lot of time with longer term is ones that I ultimately know that I can't do anything for them. They say, I know if I get to the business to 5 million times 10x, I'll be worth 50 million. I can sell the business for 50 million. What you're telling me is you really haven't thought through the math of an actual sale process. The math of a sales process is you will sell your business for, theoretically, if you're a $5 million business, you will probably sell anywhere between 6 and 9 is the practical multiple, depending on the quality of the business, maybe 5, depending. And then you have to discount at least 30 to 40% off the sale price for either a rollover equity into the ultimate business or some type of an earnout, depending on how much gap there is between valuation the buyer's placed and the valuations that you're expecting. And it's increasingly, and not a lot of buyers really want to take on a lot of earnout. Earnouts are very complicated to track, but if you need to have an earnout and an earnout needs to be a part of your deal, like you should expect that anywhere between 10 and 20% of a deal could be tied to an earnout.
And I think we can, just kind of summarize all of the different qualities, but what would be, you would say, like the ideal, there's an emotional component to this too, right? Like you were clear on the numbers, but there's an emotional component to selling your business. What would you say is the key emotional factor you need to be prepared in when you're going through a sale process?
Just be prepared to know that it's business and it's not personal. Really, I mean, sales processes are really hard. I've been through 3 of them as a founder. I'll give you some examples. I mean, one of the components of a purchase agreement says you will fundamentally represent that you've filed all your taxes on time, that you have full right and ownership of your business. No one else owns it, that there's no silent partners. Like there's fundamental reps, there's non-fundamental reps. They get a little scary because fundamental reps, buyers can go directly after the cash that they paid to you for the business, usually up to the full value that they have paid. If any of those fundamental reps turn out to be false, there are also representations around fraud that frequently exist in a purchase transaction. They feel kind of offensive. It's like, of course, this is my company. Of course, like I filed all my taxes on time. The reason why these things are there is not about you, the individual seller. It is because in any transaction, there are certain representations the financial buyer has to make sure that they check off on, because whoever gave them money expects them to have done that diligence, expects them to have tied off on all those pieces. And what happens in order to check off on all those things is a lot of legal due diligence, asking the same question 3 or 4 ways. It gets very, very frustrating. So I think what you're asking and what I'm saying is you just kind of need to be prepared for what is going to be when you sell your business for $10 million or $20 million. The easy part is just getting to the point that you agree you're going to do the deal. Now you need to go do the deal. It's going to take a lot of work and a lot of time. So it goes back to that team. Have a team who can help you facilitate that process and do a lot of that work. Because the due diligence in of itself, it can be very frustrating and it's very time consuming. And if your business is not put together, all the things that we've talked about in this episode are not true, it just becomes harder. And I do feel sometimes that some founders sort of almost take personally how the process works. I've heard the angst and the feeling of like, why are you doing this to me? 112 due diligence requests. And I've got, 3 lawyers talking to me and accountants talking to me.
And now I have to go through filling out disclosure schedules. But I already just did this whole diligence thing.
Yeah, it's hard. So be mentally prepared for the work that's in front of you to sell your business. It's very exciting. I can tell you on the other side, it's really exciting.
It's a great day, that final closing call and wiring, but everything leading up to it, and it's not even the right internal team too. It's the right deal team for you, like the right banker, the right lawyer, the right advisors, the right groups that you're a part of and networks that you're a part of for people that have been through this. I've seen YPO been a great resource for people too, for having that support, right? Because those are the people that are going to get you through the deal at the end of the day, besides for your team.
Totally. So I think we're getting to kind of the wrap point. I think, there's a few key takeaways that I'll add, which are kind of capitalizing on what I've said earlier, which is start from day one thinking about the outcome that you want to produce for the business that you're creating. What is the outcome? If you eventually want to sell, organize your business to be saleable from the day one. And practically speaking, when you get to 2 or 3 million in revenue is really when you can implement a lot of those ideas, but be thinking about that from day one. Really basic examples are have an accounting system, have a billing system in place. Don't use Google Sheets unless you really, really have to. Like, start building the foundations and have the right tools in place from day one. So when you get to $2 million in revenue, like, I need help, you've got a system and you've got stuff you can hand to someone to go do and run it. A lot of agency founders, as we've talked about, really like the craft. They don't like the details, but the details get really, really important in helping you create a very quality business that's attractive for buyers at the end. What are your thoughts, Ayelet?
Going back to thinking about what Christian said during this podcast, if any of these things that you're starting to think about are becoming like scary in a sense of, oh, wow, like I really have not figured out a lot of these, there are things that you can just do to start small, to start thinking about what you can do right now, right? If it's getting off every client call and start bringing in another member of your team to start handling their relationships, starting to just, this week, documenting all of the roles really well. Next week, start documenting your monthly reporting process and start cleaning it up with your CFO, your bookkeeper, and whatnot. Start with the little steps, right? Because that goes into the overall big picture. That will help you to be able to sell your business to maximize on the value that you want for it.
One of my favorite books that's on the shelf behind me is The One Thing. Don't overwhelm yourself. When I need to make change and make changes to how I operate and how I go about life every day, I just think about, all right, what's the one thing that I can do differently today to be a little bit different tomorrow? So you don't have to completely clean out the basement and call the dumpster and start from scratch on day one. Just start tomorrow doing one thing different to prepare yourself for where you want to go. It's not too late.
No, it's never too late.
Well, this has been a really great conversation. I've enjoyed talking about, setting up an agency for sale from day one.
Yeah, this is what I just love talking about and helping both founders and buyers. And if you like this conversation, like, subscribe, share this episode.
Cool. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Inorganic. We'll see you next time.